Hi everyone. I'm recording this video because I wanted to respond to Westside Tyler and something that he said that really didn't sit well with me. My name's Persephone Waard. I'm a multi-book author. I write about liberation, sex work liberation under capitalism through iconoclastic art. I'm an anarcho-communist. I'm against establishment politics. And I think that white moderates like him are fascists with masks, basically. That's the gist of the video. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why I think that he's a white moderate, a white savior, that kind of thing. And then I'll briefly talk about the kind of work that I do. So first and foremost, I know Westside Tyler from a recommendation from Bad Empanada. Incidentally, Bad Empanada was investigating Vosh and other people like that. Basically, people LARPing as leftists like Vosh, but also Demon Mama, who try and present themselves as left-leaning, but in practice, they actually are abusive. And in the case of Demon Mama, they're a queer person who is abusive towards their own employees, including sexually abusive towards them, not paying them. And Westside Tyler is one such individual who was investigating Demon Mama, and it basically fell on Bad Empanada's scanners. You know, his radar picked that up and he recommended the video. And I follow Bad Empanada for his postcolonialism work, and I was like, oh, ooh, what's this? So I clicked on that, and Westside Tyler gave a pretty good account for those things. He was interviewing this person. He was respectable and very kind towards them in a way that I thought was pretty good. Honestly, no complaints. And, you know, he just made sure to respect their boundaries. He didn't push them too much, but he clearly came prepared. He had a good set of questions. And this person who had worked for Bad Empanada, this person who had worked for Demon Mama that Westside Tyler was interviewing was able to kind of answer everything and felt very comfortable. And Westside Tyler seemed to know what he was talking about in regards to people who had been abused in the past, and looking into their abuse and their testimony. And, you know, he just seemed to really know what he was doing. And I was like, okay, cool. This guy seems all right. I guess I'll subscribe to him. And then what ended up happening was I saw another video, kind of a low-hanging fruit video, but he was going after Shadiversity, who's basically an Australian Mormon, from what I understand. Again, a literal LARPer in this case, who is basically, he wrote this novel, Shadows of the Conqueror, I think it was, and it's basically a fanfic with Shad as the main character, and there's a lot of like Atlas Shrugged type stuff, and basically apologetics for capitalism. It's very Orwellian. It's like where white straight people make themselves out to be the victim of an authoritarian sort of crisis, but they're also kind of like a fascist sort of conqueror. There's a lot of apologetics like that, which incidentally, Orwell was an imperial cop. He turned in a lot of British communists, and he's basically full of shit. So it really reminded me of that kind of stuff, and Westside Tyler reviewed that, and he seemed to know a lot about fantasy writing, which I thought was kind of cool. And he was critiquing this because there was a lot of like sexual assaults depicted in the book, just unironic rape fantasies, basically. Consent, non-consent is one thing, and if you're doing that with other people and it's like fetish or kink stuff and everyone's agreeing, rape play is totally fine. It's a huge crux of my research. But that's like palliative, it's medicinal, it's helping us get over trauma. Whereas this is literally a straight conservative guy who is getting his jollies by raping a bunch of people, and not just raping them, but blaming the victim, gaslighting them. Even one of the victims, after the hero dies, comes back to life as a young man because he was an old man. When he's a young man, he meets one of his victims. She ends up forgiving him, and then I think they get married, and she defends him in court against an inquisition, and he's killed and raped a lot of people. So it's that kind of shit. That's what I mean by low-hanging fruit. So Westside Tyler, it's literally the bare minimum that you critique something like that. And honestly, your critique was pretty good. But then you done fucked up. And you are basically released this video, and you are critiquing Hassan Piker. Now, I'm not saying you done fucked up for critiquing Hassan Piker, because I critique Hassan too. And even though I agree with Hassan being against establishment politics, being against the genocide in Gaza, against the Palestinians, and just anywhere in the world, really, the global south more broadly, the state needs to be dismantled. Hassan doesn't say that part nearly enough. He will critique the genocide in Palestine, but then he goes to the Democratic Convention, so there's certainly things there that can be said. He also was someone who said once that trans people, let me speak for you because you're too radical. Because apparently us speaking out for ourselves, the pedagogy of the oppressed, is too much, and we need a straight guy to speak for us. And he also said the same thing for people of color in America. He's called himself white. I know he's Turkish. I believe he's Muslim, but he's often referred to himself as white, and he says, specifically talking about Black Americans, African Americans, and other people of color, he's referred to himself as white vis-a-vis those groups. He's also said, let me speak for you. White people aren't going to listen to you, but they might listen to me. I'm more than happy for him to speak in our defense as an ally, but to tell us not to say anything and just sit there and be polite, which is basically what Hassan said, that's super gross. It's a white savior thing. It's a straight savior thing. So I'm happy to critique Hassan Piker. I don't know the guy personally. I like some of his stuff, but that kind of shit is really icky. And it's totally possible to enjoy the work that someone does, but critique their pernicious aspects. Anita Sarkeesian, right? Well, it turns out, Westside Tyler, I can critique you too. And incidentally, I can also critique Bad Empanada, the person who recommended one of your videos. He's a Marxist-Leninist, and he said some things before. He basically said, oh, by the way, people who talk about sex like it's their main interest should be dealt with, make it illegal again. It's literally Stalin's arguments from 1933, the same year that the Nazis burned down the Institute of Sexology in Germany. All those famous photos of Nazis burning books, that's what you're looking at. So, as far as that goes, if I can critique Bad Empanada, I can critique Hassan Piker, and Demon Mama, I can also critique you, because guess what? You're a white cishet guy. So, and as far as I can tell, you're not Muslim either. You know, I can critique all of those things, but you have the most privilege out of any of us. Because I'm a white trans woman, middle class. You know, I live in a blue state. I'm relatively protected. That being said, I'm trans, and I'm very open about it, and I'm an open communist. So, you know, not only do I have less privilege than you, it's not a contest, but you're literally the status quo, okay? You are a white cishet guy. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but you don't really give off queer energy. You don't sound queer. You've never said it before. You sound like a straight guy. And could be wrong, but I don't think that I am. And you're definitely not a communist. And as we'll see in just a second here, you're actually for the establishment. So the problem with you, I noticed when I was watching this specific video, supporting movements like Uncommitted will fail every time. Vote blue no matter what is basically what he says. And there's a specific clip here that I wanted to watch, where he says, I would rather shake hands with a sane red voter, someone who voted for Trump, which is someone who voted against my rights and voted against the rights of people of color and voted for the rights against all oppressed groups, immigrants, the people who are going to be getting exported or deported back to Mexico, but really anywhere. And this includes not just illegal aliens, but anyone housing an illegal alien will be getting deported. This includes natural citizens. Like, that's unconstitutional. So this is Nazi shit. And Westside Taylor is mad because he has to go through another 4 years of Trump. And he'd rather punch down against uncommitted voters who are being held hostage by the Democratic Party, who created people like Trump, because all they'll do is say, well, we created Trump, we're going to run against him, and we're not going to offer you anything except if you don't vote for us, you get him. That's an ultimatum, and that's one to uphold the status quo. They torpedoed Bernie, who's barely left of center. He's a sock dem, for Christ's sake, and he's still imperialist. But they thought he was too radical. Okay, so you're saying vote blue no matter what, and I'll talk to these sane, rational, and there's a lot of people like that, and I'll talk to them and shake hands with them, debate Nazis, because guess what? Republicans, all Republicans, their policies are fascist. It's knives out at this point. It's not just the fringe, and it affects everyone. And for us, this is every day. Whereas you, it just doesn't affect you. So you're saying some really stupid punch down shit because none of this affects you because you're a cishet white guy. And I don't care if you look into victims of sexual assault, because if you do that and then you do some Nazi shit, guess what you are? You're Gandhi, you're Mother Teresa. It is, it's meaningless. It's an Omalist refrain. Those Who Walk Away from Omalist by Ursula K. Le Guin, 1973. That's what you're doing. You're not walking away from Omalist. And you're cordoning certain people off. You're punching them down from a position of relative privilege, from ultimate universal privilege, because you're a white straight guy. You're doing the white savior, white moderate thing. It's what Martin Luther King would critique. It's easy to understand people who are openly racist, but people who could help but don't and say they're your friend, but then stab you in the back, the white moderate, that's what you're doing. And what applied to people of color, and also the lavender panic in the 1950s and 60s, also applies to what's happening right now. So you are someone who's punching down. You're just a white moderate. That's all you are. You're heteronormative, you're settler colonial, and you're Cartesian. These are things that I could unpack. America's a settler colony. It never stopped being a settler colony because military urbanism and the imperial boomerang is what's happening right now. And even if we voted for the Democrats, redlining would still be a problem. Police brutality would still be a problem. Trans people, all of these problems that we're facing happened under, both sides of the political aisle, the establishment political aisle. So it didn't matter who won the election for us. Okay, you're just saying this because it affects you in a negative way. Oh, your eggs will cost more? Fuck you. Oh, darn. Make do. It's time to actually get in the fight. And you know what you did? You showed your ass. Because this is what this motherfucker said. Let's see if I got to the right point.
Do you not understand what the point of all of this is? Do you not understand that you're voting for 4 years, the next 4 years down the line? It's not like a fucking, I'm really happy for the last 4. It's, I fucking really want 4 more years of...
So he's mad right now because uncommitted voters didn't vote. And he's not saying this about people who voted for Trump. He's saying this about people who didn't vote for Kamala. And he's like, oh, well... what's the matter? You want Trump to get elected? So again, vote blue no matter who. It's a white moderate thing. It's ultimately a fascism light thing. He's the guy with the knife behind his back. But now the knife's coming out and he's punching down.
Not the other thing. You didn't have leverage. You didn't have leverage.
He's also conflating leverage with voting. It's not leverage. You want to know what leverage is? Intersectional solidarity and activism. It's our labor power, which capital exploits us through wage theft, labor theft. Voting is the illusion of choice because the outcome is essentially the same, especially in the global south. But the kinds of things that happen over here, the Democrats just whitewash. But genocide is still happening over here too because America is still a settler colony. It's a police state. It's a prison state. And it's enforced concentrically on the federal level to the state level in smaller and smaller areas. And a lot of the genocide that occurs is pushed off into ghettos, but it doesn't change the fact that it is widespread. And this is a direct result of establishment politics, of the Electoral College, things like that. I don't hear you saying shit about that. All you're pissing and moaning about is the fact that some people didn't vote. Well, those people who didn't vote, even if they had voted, Kamala did so badly that she still wouldn't have won. It doesn't matter. But you're choosing to attack them, and what you say next really gets me.
You tried to pretend that you did, and it fucking snapped off underneath you and fucking stabbed you in the chest. Now you're fucked. You're fucked. You fucked the whole thing up. So even if they do,
you fucked the whole thing up. So apparently it's all our fault because I didn't vote. Go fuck yourself.
Lose. It's fucking. It's that entire subsection of the internet's fault, and they need to be treated.
It's our fault. That entire selection. So collective punishment. Nice.
Treated poorly.
We need to be treated poorly. Nice. So he's blaming us. It's a witch hunt. Nice.
By everybody. Going
by everybody.
Forward. There needs to be no, like, I will fucking shake hands across the aisle with a fucking not psychopathic fucking Republican. There are some well before. There's a lot of fucking red voters I would have a conversation with and shake hands with. And
okay. So apparently there's good people on both sides. The Trump argument. And he would rather shake hands with people who voted against my rights, who voted against women's rights, who voted against people of color's rights, who voted against immigrants' rights. People's rights, regardless if they're legal citizens or not, are defense from the state. So he would rather shake hands with someone who voted to genocide us, to take away our rights, because that's ultimately what genocide is. You take away people's rights, then you harm them. You unhouse them, you relocate them, you concentrate them, and ultimately you exterminate them. And extermination can happen before you reach the camps. Holocaust by bullet. What do you think police violence is?
Say, like, you're a reasonable person before almost any of the uncommitted people.
Okay, so, and he's saying that vis-a-vis uncommitted people. We're not reasonable, apparently, because if you don't vote, then you're not doing harm reduction. Apparently, everything gets put on us. You have to blame the system and critique it, not voters. Doesn't mean I like people who voted red. They suck because they're literally saying, well, I'm not about harm reduction. I'm about causing more harm, which sucks. And someone like Chappelle Roan, for instance, who's like, I'm going to do harm reduction but for the people at home, domestically, okay. But also I'm going to point out very vocally, without like a speaking coach, a publicist, and call out the White House and say, you know, no, I'm not going to perform for you. You're causing a genocide. Both sides of the problem. That's totally fine. And some people want to vote for that. A friend of mine, Ginger, said, it's hard to have a revolution if you're barefoot and pregnant. I'm going to use any opportunity that I can to make sure that I'm as physically capable to wage a revolution. And if that means, you know, I'm going to protest the genocide in Gaza no matter what, raise awareness towards that, but also I'm going to try and push for women's rights and things like that, even though it is important to acknowledge that Roe v. Wade was something that failed under Biden. Biden was the architect of ICE and the internment camps, and presidents are just war criminals, period. They're war criminals abroad and domestically speaking. That's all they care about, because establishment politics, it's a police structure with different gates that gatekeep power and put it at the very top. And that includes establishment politicians, which are kind of like middle tier on the totem pole. Closer to the bottom, you have the middle class. And middle class, someone like West Side Tyler, is someone who kisses up and punches down. They're the gatekeepers of establishment politicians, and establishment politicians are the gatekeepers of their corporate donors, the donor class, and the bourgeoisie more broadly. They might not have their fingers in quite as many pies, but they're millionaires at the very least, and they defend billionaires. And someone like West Side Taylor, probably not a millionaire, but he's someone who's clearly comfortably middle class. You know, he has a nice house, he has a pet rabbit, bunny cam. You know, rabbits are high maintenance pets. And, you know, just look at him. You know, he's a cishet white guy who's making the white moderate argument. You know, of course he's middle class. And obviously, you know, he's someone, he has the bookshelf, lots of nice photos on the wall. You know, he's not poor. He's doing all right for himself. And he might not have a big channel, but it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't matter. You know, and he says a lot of stupid shit, including it's the undecided people's vote, even though the undecided vote wouldn't swing things. I'm going to blame you. You're my scapegoat. And I'd rather shake hands with the person who voted to genocide you, because there's so many good people, but you suck. So it's a witch hunt, and that's what he's doing. It's cop behavior. All cops are bad. West Side Taylor's a cop. He sucks. Another thing I wanted to say, though, real quick before I talk about the work that I do, is I respond to him initially, and as far as that goes, so, and correct me if I'm wrong in understanding your argument, but you'd shake hands with a red voter who voted for the open Nazi instead of someone who didn't vote blue, i.e. for the Nazi light. My guy, voting in America is an illusion of Morton's fork. Sooner or later, revolution has to happen, and it's frankly cop behavior to get mad at people disillusioned with the establishment process, which only prolongs genocide, instead of those enforcing it. Republicans are Nazis. Democrats are moderate Republicans, thus Nazis with friendly little masks on. To befriend a Nazi is to be a Nazi. The system must be dismantled and converted into something that doesn't serve the elite and not placated to further elite interests. Voting is far less important than, as you put it, leverage, i.e. worker action, awareness, activism. Our labor, value, and intersectional solidarity is our greatest strength. To which he replies gibberish. So when he says gibberish, he's disagreeing with everything, including my agreement with him. If it's gibberish, then apparently leverage doesn't mean anything. The only thing that matters to him is voting, not worker action. Labor has infinite value, which is why the elite try and exploit it through labor theft, wage theft, and just various genocidal policies, carceral violence, police brutality, things like that, class consciousness, cultural consciousness, race awareness, things like that. Being woke, as they used to say back in the day before conservative people took the term and used obscurantism to play the victim and say, oh, well, woke is the enemy. They tried to recuperate the term, essentially. And activism more broadly. He says activism is, these are not controversial statements. These are pretty basic shit. He says it's gibberish. He says it's gibberish that our labor value and intersectional solidarity is our greatest strength. He says that's gibberish. He says that voting in America not being a Morton's fork, he says that's gibberish. Apparently, voting blue is all it takes. He says it's okay to shake hands with the open Nazi instead of someone who's Nazi light, etc. You know, he says he denies that Republicans are Nazis, that Democrats are moderate Republicans, thus Nazis with friendly little masks on, according to Westside Tyler. That's gibberish. To befriend a Nazi is to be a Nazi. That's, according to him, gibberish. So he said quite a bit with one word. That's the problem with one word responses. When someone comes at you with a well-reasoned argument or one that covers a lot of different things and you just write it off, you're saying a lot of things with that one word. It's doing a lot of lifting. Unfortunately for him, it's showing his ass. And so I said that 11 hours ago, 58 minutes ago, he said gibberish, and then I had responded to it. I tried sending this message once. It didn't go through, but it was on my phone, and YouTube on my phone is iffy, so I'm sending this again here. Sending this again, as it looks like you didn't let it go through. If it doesn't go through this time, I'll know that you censored it, and you don't have the guts to face facts. You think intersectional solidarity and worker action leverage is gibberish, and you'd rather debate Nazis to uphold establishment politics. Way to show me your ass, dude. And if all you have is a white straight guy, I'm trans, a sex worker, activist, illustrator, and multi-book author who works with other sex workers for universal liberation, is a one-word hand wave on top of that. It's what you'll be doing when things get progressively worse for people unlike yourself, i.e. trans people like me, but also immigrants and people of color, etc. We have to blame the system and critique it, not voters. Otherwise, you're just looking for a scapegoat. It's white savior behavior and only decays into fascism, i.e. you'll decay into fascism, Tyler. Do better. So yeah, you know, I mean what I said. He's a white moderate. White moderates are just fascists in disguise. America has been and always will be fascist unless we dismantle it. To vote blue, you're just voting for fascism light. That's all it is. But he's making the argument as the white cishet dude. I don't know if he's religious or not. That apparently voting blue is what we have to do, and he's making the same arguments that the Democratic Party made in 2016. You know, so 8 years ago now he's making the Gamergate argument. He's a piece of shit and he sucks. And I'm someone who does, you know, I look into, you know, sex worker rights too. Wouldn't you know? Wow, that's funny. Why don't we take a look at that? So we click on this here. I have a website with multiple books written on it, self-published, admittedly, but I've been doing this for years now. In 2014 and 2015, I graduated from Eastern Michigan University. I had a degree in English studies, minored in linguistics. But then in 2018, so 2017, I went to England, Manchester, at Manchester Metropolitan University. I studied Gothic studies, essentially, and the entire period from its inception to the 20th century to post-millennial type stuff. And so I got the full treatment. And then from there, I got my degree. I wrote my thesis in 2018. So, I have my MA in Gothic studies. And then I pursued my PhD in 2019, 2020. COVID happened, which made things more difficult. And frankly, it's just, I went to seminars and things before that. Symposiums, a few different ones I can recommend. I've given talks and things like that before. And admittedly, talks like that, they're just like the beginning of what you turn into a paper that you try and get published. I have submitted papers for publication before. They've been rejected. They've also been accepted if I would make revisions, but at that point, it was in the middle of COVID. I had to wait a year, and I was already kind of disillusioned with academia at that point. I had reached out to different supervisors. I had one in mind that I was working with, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And even though I was constantly in contact with him, he kind of changed his mind, and that happened. So after that point, doing that for a couple of years, in 2020, I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that. And I started leaning more into research. And I've written a lot of things about women's rights and queer people's rights in media. And there's different things I could recommend. The problem is I do a lot of work in sex work, so it gets censored like instantly on YouTube. But I'll post, there's a couple of things I'll post in the comments of this video. But I have 4 books, incidentally, and I started writing them in 2022. I came out in 2022, and these books, Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion or Gothic Communism, or Liberating Sex Work under Capitalism through Iconoclastic Art, my PhD, independently researched, going on 10 years now, 11 years actually, worth of research. There's a video I can recommend talking about that I'll just put in the description. I have written 4 books, going on 5. There's ultimately 7 that I'll be publishing, and it has to do with, I'm an anarcho-communist, specifically gay anarcho-communists, gay, queer anarcho-communist, basically. Gay, Gothic, gay, anarcho-communist is the full thing. It's something I came up with. Mario Miele in the 1970s had queer communism, gay communism, that kind of thing. But I'm someone who's critical of communism historically being quite queerphobic. Marx and Engels were queerphobic. Lenin was pushing towards queer acceptance in the Soviet Union. There's some historical evidence for that. But Stalin in 1933 made homosexuality illegal. It was illegal for the next 60 years. It was made illegal the same year that the Nazis burned down the Institute of Sexology in Germany. Magnus Hirschfeld, all the photos of them burning down the Institute, again, come from that specific historical event. So I'm willing to critique the Soviet Union, and I'm willing to critique just the founders of Marxism because they were homophobic, pretty intensely homophobic. Marx in particular was also anti-Semitic, and he was born Jewish from what I understand, but he also is some pretty, compelling evidence. I can provide some links to that as well, and just various other instances. Marxist-Leninism, again, is something that I've critiqued. I've critiqued the Mao and stuff like that. I mentioned that earlier. So I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, and I incorporate a lot of different theories: postcolonialism, queer theory, and game studies, and anarcho-communism, and a lot of different thinkers. And a lot of this goes together. and to try and critique things holistically to break capitalist realism. So my first book is my PhD, and it basically combines all of the ideas that I use throughout the series. It has my thesis argument, which is capitalism sexualizes everything, vis-a-vis capitalism alienates everything, which is Marx. So I synthesize some different ideas to holistically combine this and that intersectionally to help liberate all work as sexualized and fetishized under capital. That's my PhD. Manifesto, same thing, but it sort of simplifies the theory and talks about it at a more ground level, sort of grassroots kind of level, about synthesizing praxis through daily habits that we cultivate through the media that we create. So I do that for my manifesto, and then those books are only available in PDF format, which you can download on this page. I can't scroll down just because there's a lot of nudity in the work that I do. My site is 18 and up, but I do have other sites, other web pages on this website that include more recent books that I've written in the same series, my poetry module, my, what's this one? Poetry module, my undead module, and my demons module. So poetry, it's just like, okay, I'm a medievalist and I think about things poetically through critical thought, various critical thinkers, things like that. The undead module talks about the history of undead poetics, things like the imperial boomerang, zombie apocalypse, state of exception, police states, things like that. Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead being a metaphor by George Romero for the civil rights movement, things like that. And then the demon module, I'm still writing it, but you can go there. And each module promo or book promo is that you can access in a blog style is divided per section, and you can scroll through and there's a synopsis for each subsection and subsection and so on. I subdivide and subdivide and so on. There's little summaries for everything. Everything is linked and color coded, and there's images and exhibits and all kinds of cool shit. But if you don't want to download a PDF and scroll through it on your phone, you can go through these promos, table of contents. It includes there's a disclaimer at the bottom of each of the table of contents. The disclaimer also is in the PDF files for all of these books that you can download on this page for free. It's nonprofit, and it also talks about like why I'm doing what I'm doing. It talks about the Miller test and how my work is fair use, but it's also not obscene legally. So it's designed as intellectual to achieve critical thought for purposes of education and critique. So those are three things right there that it does. And there's various qualities of the Miller test. There's three different ones. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it passes the Miller test. It gives I give trigger warnings. I talk about who my ideal audience is, who I think probably shouldn't be reading the book, and so on and so forth. So if you should definitely read the disclaimer going in. Each of my books talks about what I will exhibit, what I won't, so on and so forth. Excuse me. Also, this project is a project that is written with the help of my partner, Bay Ryan. They're a Mali indigenous person, sex worker. They're disabled. They're someone who helped me co-write my PhD, and they help me edit and read different sections as I'm producing them, illustrating them, what have you. They give ideas. They recommend other sex workers to work with, so on and so forth. So they're one person. You can actually find them. They have their own page here. Bay Ryan, you can go and read about them and the work that they do. I have images and examples of their work. My other partner, Crow, same idea. You can read about them and the work that they do. Crow's non-binary. Bay's non-binary. I'm a trans woman. If you want to see also the acknowledgements for the entire project, you can click here. And there's dozens of models that I've worked with. I have like 16 muses at this point. And some of my muses have their own pages where you can go and see their portfolios. Just click on them. If you want to see the models, you can click here or here. and read about them. And there's a lot of other things on this page too. I talk about the logo, book details, click here or here for that. About the author, if you want to read about me and the work that I've done. I'm a sex worker, an academic. I also do activism, obviously, with these books. I've written going on 2 million words at this point, going on 5 books, 4 going on 5. If you want to read about Gothic Communism and the logo design, you can read about it here. Again, the acknowledgements for the whole project and the glossary. So all kinds of stuff like that. That's about all I can really show you, though, in terms of what YouTube will let me. Yeah, lots of stuff, though. So I'm not just like gibberish. Okay, so if you want to write off my comment and stuff like that, but then you're also writing off the work that I do. You're writing off, the dozens upon dozens of people that I've worked with who are all sex workers. A lot of them are women. Many of them are trans men, trans women. Several of them are indigenous. Several of them are people of color. Some of them are fat, so non-Vitruvian bodies. And most of us are basically disillusioned with the political process in some shape or form. Again, these people that I've worked with, it was a negotiated process. I reached out to them. Some of them reached out to me, and I said, this is what my project is about. I'm fighting for sex worker liberation using Gothic poetics and negotiating labor exchanges that become context, illustrating mutual consent through an informed labor exchange. That's something that I can exhibit, invigilate, and talk about. So if you discount what I say, you're discounting the entire project, Westside Taylor, and that sucks. And you're just more evidence that you're a white moderate, a straight guy. You have white cishet people disease. It's really gross and sad, and you should know better, and you suck. And that's in my professional opinion. That's someone with my master's, but also having written my independent PhD. Again, 10 years of research have gone into this. I'm an activist. I'm a historian. I know what I'm talking about. And I specialize specifically in Metroidvania, but also gender studies and Gothic studies surrounding rape expression through BDSM. I've coined multiple terms. Ludogothic BDSM, in particular, is a term that I have looked into, which is basically rape play, but taking game theory into account, in that the ability to play is something that goes into activism and consent, non-consent through BDSM, and Ludo, to play, Gothic poetics, and BDSM, which is basically forms of unequal power exchange, bondage, discipline or domination, and sadomasochism. And these are all possibly sex-positive things in practice, provided they're done correctly. Obviously, the Marquis de Sade did not do them correctly. Angela Carter in the 1970s did not do them correctly. Susan Sontag in Fascinating Fascism really didn't understand how they could be used in a sex-positive sense. Clive Barker and a million other people since then who have looked at BDSM and demonized it, quite literally. Clive Barker's Cenobites are sex demons, which are metaphors for blood libel, sodomy, and witch hunter rhetoric, things like that. Read Hot Allostatic Load, and witch hunting isn't something that's restricted to just white women. It's now restricted to a particular historical movement, and accusing trans people of rape, for instance, is something that happened even within the trans community, often white trans people accusing black trans people of rape. I have been accused of being a man in a dress by female cis sex workers before, so I have a history of being attacked by trans misogynistic sex workers. So there are some examples I can provide of that if needed. But yeah, so I've dealt with tokenism before, but also just straight bigotry, which is what you're doing. Don't do it. Get some help. Do better. So that's all I wanted to say about Westside Taylor. I don't want to really belabor the points. I've said enough already. I've said what I wanted to say about him, and the fact that he's a white moderate. I've said what I've said about me. I'm Gothic, gay, anarcho-communist, basically. So, and that's something that I pioneered. I've done a lot of research into this. It's not just gibberish. It's not just me. There's a large group of people, an entire community that you're discounting that have gone into this. And if you think it's insane, then basically you're just punching down against queer sex workers and women and people of color and minorities of different kinds. So yeah, maybe don't do that. I'm going to post that and just some other things talking about. I'll do a little community post as well. I don't normally do this kind of thing because normally I'm balls deep in writing, but I wanted to say something about it. And yeah, so that's basically the video. I hope that you guys appreciate it. And until next time, thanks for tuning in. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to. Leave feedback. Happy to respond to criticism. Nazis fuck off, white moderates fuck off, etc., etc. Until next time, survive, solidarize, and speak out, comrades. Take care.